It's 10:50 on January 23rd, 2026. This episode, story number 45, is going to be released January 24th, 2026. Which means I have an hour and 10 minutes before the episode's supposed to be released. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, this is quite literally the closest I've ever come to putting out an episode. And my goodness, this episode is going to be a really interesting one because I'm not going to lie to you. This is quite literally my fourth attempt to do this episode. My first attempt actually began at 10:27 p.m. Of course, can't forget that part. Here on January 23rd, 2026. And I have since had to redo the entire episode multiple times. Approximately, like I said, at least four. At least four. I, as you all know, do not believe in editing. But the first two episodes that I had tried to record were not quite what I wanted them to be. And since I don't edit any of that stuff out, and fortunately enough, if I'm going to mess up bad enough that I need to start over again, I don't mind doing it in the first 10 minutes, which is what happened both times. Well, the first three times. The fourth time was a stupid, and I'm just going to let you know that's what it was. 100% stupid. Here I am about to make the recording after I had messed up the third time, and I go and I delete the old episode that was on there at 10 minutes, whatever it was. And instead of hitting the record button before I sat down, I just walked over to this couch and sat down and started jawing away. Meanwhile, in the process of me doing that, not a single word I said was recorded, and I only discovered that because my setup showed me what shows me what I'm looking at to see myself in the background, and all of a sudden the tablet went blank. Why did it go blank? Because it didn't hit record, and it was just sitting there waiting for me to do so. And since I didn't, it was just waiting for me to do it until eventually it said, "Oh, okay, we're done." And so we are done. But now, this episode, which is a story episode, I could almost tell a story about that. In fact, I pretty much did tell a story about how this episode was messed up multiple times until I finally got it to record. That's where we're at right this moment. Now, normally, after recording an episode, I have a couple days, usually anywhere between, I'll do it on Tuesday, so you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I release on Saturday. Usually like 5 days before I release it, before I take my mother to dialysis in the morning. So the episodes get put out now sometime around 6 o'clock in the morning. But now, the way this one's going, it's going to be past midnight by the time I finish it. And so January 24th, 2026 will arrive probably before I finish this episode, which means I'm gonna just download it right away without even thinking about anything else. It's gonna be the first thing I'm gonna do is just download the episode and then go to bed for a little while. But that's how that's gonna play out. Now that I've told you, like I always tell you, I like to let you see what's going on behind the curtain. I pretty much have shown you what's going on behind the curtain of this episode. In the process of me doing those three other takes prior to this one, or is this the fourth one? I think that, yeah, this is the fourth one. I decided that this story episode was going to be different because, well, that's going to be the fill in the blank now. Why is this episode going to be different? Well, this episode's going to be different because there's going to be a pretty massive snowstorm coming up. And as a result of that snowstorm, which is going to be on the 24th of January, the mayor of Philadelphia has given us a state of emergency which begins at 9 p.m. on the 24th. So I figured maybe I'll just tell stories about snow instead of just the ones that I had planned, which of course I was going to add one snow story into it, but then as I was thinking about it when I was re-recording episode after episode, that I have more than one story that I could tell about snow. And so, why not just make this whole story episode about snow? Gonna snow anyway, right? So, I might as well go there. And thus, the fill in the blanks episode of this is why would I change the episode even after doing all those extra takes? Because it's gonna snow and I have multiple snow stories, so I might as well use them. That's the fill in the blank. And now I'm gonna ring the bell and start the main event. Where do we begin? Do we begin with the story that I originally wanted to tell first and remove, or am I going to ad lib and give you one of the others? I'll ad lib one first. I'll give you one of the other ones before I go to the one that I had alternately planned. Let's see if we can put this setting down. This would have to have taken place early in 2011 in Philadelphia. We had a pretty major snowstorm. I'm going to say, yeah, it had to be, because it was just horrible. Now, that day made it that much worse was because, man, that's what's crazy about it, because my memory has gone slightly blank, but it wasn't that blank. It was a horrible trip home. Now, I was still working at the shops at the time. In fact, I was working at Pep Boys, and it was beginning to snow, and it was bad. Really, really, really bad. I usually would take me about 20 minutes to a half an hour to get home. And I'd get off at 9 o'clock, and I'd be there, like I said, sometime around 9:30, 9:45, give or take. Not this day. It was so bad, couldn't see anything, and I was driving my little green 92 Honda Accord at the time. Granted, that little car and its 14-inch rims actually did very, very well in the snow. But that's neither here nor there, because it's not about me, it's about everybody else around me driving. And boy, I was going at a really slow pace, and it took me about an hour to get home. It was probably, what time was it? Yeah, it was probably like 9, it was probably 10:20 by the time I got home. Just freezing. Had been running in and out all day from the shop. Was tired, and then this long drive was killing me. Now, at the time, my wife was working at the police station as what they would call a Cora. She was in the office, and her shift was 2:30 to 10:30, or was it 2 to 10? I can't. I think it might have been 2:30 to 10. That sounds right, because after I got home, it was maybe it was 10, and she was trying to get out, and she couldn't get out. She had this '09, it was 2010 Sportage. '09? '09 Sportage. And couldn't get it out of the parking spot. Now, the parking, for the most part, at that specific police district was street parking. And she parked, and the snow was really deep. It had to have been, well, really deep for us over here. I know some people in other areas, it's not even close to deep, but for us, fairly deep. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of, at the time when it was continuously snowing, and it was still impactfully snowing, it was 6 to 8, maybe even a little bit more, and it was still snowing, which would made it even worse. It just kept snowing. It was not going to stop. There was a point in time where you could tell that it was getting deeper and deeper, even when we were out there just trying to move our vehicle out of the way. Now, at this time, I had just driven my poor little car, and I wedged it into a spot just outside of the police station, and I couldn't get my car anymore. It was done. Absolutely done. And so, fortunately, I was off the next couple of days, which was nice. And so what I did was we dug and pushed and dug and pushed, and finally got the Sportage out of the parking space that it was in. And boy, that little Sportage was in that space, and in that space really, really, really good. Whew. Now that we got it out, we had to make a decision, because every single time you turned the wheel, you had to decide what you were going to do. And in order for us to get back to the apartment that we were living at the time, there were a couple of options in order to get back. And option one was not a great option, and option two was worse. So instead of taking option two, we took option one, which was not great, but it wasn't worse like option two. Option two would have had us weaving around through back side roads, which were definitely not paved. Option one took us to an area where there was trolley tracks and would get us to City Ave, which was a main artery that they were definitely going to have to plow, which would make it a little easier, but not much. And so we're on our way. We're slowly inching our way, because the one problem about it was in the Overbrook area, and you don't realize how many hills there are until you start driving and having to push your vehicle every so often in the snow. That's when you learn that just how many hills there are in a certain area. And boy, that area, there are hills that you didn't even realize were hills. And they weren't even high, some of them. But just because all the snow was coming down so heavy and it was packing in, because it was still active, it was just super slick, no traction at all. And this Sportage was not a four-wheel drive. It was not. And it was squealing and moving and twisting and turning, and there was a point where I was like, I drove because I had experience in driving at the time in bad snow, where of course she at the time had only been driving for a couple of years and wasn't quite at that level to be able to maneuver in snow like that. So essentially I drove up to a certain point. Then as we were driving up the street, as we got on to, I believe it was Lancaster. Yeah, it was Lancaster. We drove up that very, very slowly. And then it happened. To get on the city Ave from where we were, it was a hill. And it was an impossible to maneuver hill. Like, we were watching cars drift up, drift up, drift up, spin back down. But the problem was, when they decided to make their turns, some of those cars just went back and just left and abandoned it. Don't know where they were going or where they were coming from, but we knew, both of us, me and my wife, knew that there was no way that we had gotten as far as we had if we had gone the other direction in order to get to our apartment. It would have been much, much harder. Because, though, like I said, the roads that we would be taking would clearly not have been touched at all as far as plows go. So our really best bet and only real way to get home was to take City Ave, which would have been the more plowed road. But unfortunately, we had to get up a little hill in order to do it. It did not give up anything. Oof. Got to the point where I was out and I was pushing. And of course, talking about a combination of hindsight being 2020 right now, me thinking about pushing that vehicle up that hill, that was probably one of the most dangerous things I've ever done in my entire life, because knowing that there was zero traction at all in that vehicle, none, and I'm pushing in this stuff. The car didn't have any traction, but neither did I. So it wouldn't have been a stretch of the imagination for me to have slipped and then the car to have run me over. It would not have been. That was a real possibility as I think about it right now as I record. And that was 10, 15 years ago. And yeah, I could definitely see how that car could have run me over because of lack of traction. And that definitely would have been a negative situation, completely. But it was what it was, and we got nowhere. Just as we were really failing, and we had been there for a few minutes, some people were walking up as they were trying to take the bus, which wasn't going to be coming for, because at the time it was so bad. I think they might have even cut off the bus service at that point, because these people were trying to get to a train and they had to walk up that hill that we just drove up barely. And they stopped and they saw me trying to push, and it was a lady and a man. I'll never forget the two of them. They helped push us up the hill. Without their help, there's no way that I was getting that Sportage up the hill. And we're talking, it was like 8 feet. And there was no way that I could have done it alone. With those two people, the 8 feet, we got it up there. Fortunately, we were kind enough and they were kind enough to help us, and we offered them a ride to the train station. And so we slowly made our way up to the train station, dropped them off, put ourselves a little above where we were supposed to be in order to get to our apartment, but that was okay because we would have to turn back around and we were going essentially downhill to get to our apartment. So that made it a little bit easier. And of course, on our way back, we get to the street parking for our apartment and we get stuck just a little bit on the outside edge, and a tow truck was good enough to pull us in the rest of the way. Now, the two of us had an interesting uh, interaction. Now, I was not suggesting that I was going to offer any money, and they were not suggesting that they were looking to ask for any money. And so when it was over with, I went, thank you. No, no, you're not going to pay me. Did you want any money for it? Well, if you had said you wanted money, I would have just told you to drive on. But you didn't say it. And I didn't say I was going to offer you any money. So we went our separate ways after they pushed us in. That was a whole lot of fun. And oh yeah, don't forget, I left my little green 92 uh, Honda Accord back at the police station. And I mentioned that I was off a couple days. And it turned out that, well, the second day I went back and I dug it out and I brought it home. But quite literally, it was on the street in that side area for 2 days because I couldn't move it if I wanted to. The snow was still too deep, it was too low to the ground, and there's no way that I'd have been able to do that hill with it. A couple days later, that hill was plowed. I was able to get my car out. But it took a couple of days. And that was probably one of the most interesting snow experiences that I had. And it was here in the city of Philadelphia, in that West Philly, Overbrook area. I can promise you, I am really glad, just based on what I've seen and just driving in South Philly, I'm so glad I wasn't any part of that at that point in time. Whew. South Philly is an experience without snow. I can't imagine what it's like with snow. And trust me, I don't really want to know. The next thing I'm going to talk to you about is a story of my first interaction with neighbors after we moved into my mother-in-law's house. And this is the first interaction I had with these neighbors. Let me give you a general idea of how I like to handle things in situations, especially when it regards to my home. I typically have the feeling that what I want to do is get inside my four walls and not be bothered by the outside world. When I walk out of my four walls, typically I only do so with a specific purpose in mind. I'm going to the store. I'm going to work. I'm going to the gym. I'm going to take the kids to the park. Whatever. I have an exact agenda. And I don't necessarily want to be I guess the only word I could think of is bothered when I'm on my way out. I'm leaving the house with a purpose. And I do so, and some people might think of that my leaving with a purpose as, say, a little rude at times. But, I have a place to go, and that's the reason why I walked out of my four walls. Otherwise, I would have my feet up and relax, play a video game, watching TV, or if there was some purpose for me to be outside, let's say, I don't know, mowing the lawn, starting up the grill, whatever it is, then I'd be outside. But I'd still have a purpose, and I just would like to keep my purpose in my little bubble and sort of stay there. Um, Realistically, when at home, I am very much so like I just don't want to be bothered a lot. I don't. Now, we moved into my mother-in-law's house, and unfortunately, we tried to take care of her as best we could, but we couldn't do anything. She needed more care than we were able to provide, and she had to go to a nursing home where she could get the 24-hour care. And so we left the apartment and moved into her house. And it happened one day. I learned a lot about Philadelphia's snow policy, but at the same time, going back to my original saying of I really don't like to interact with people when I'm on my way out somewhere or coming back in. I just don't. Call it a weird um, idiosyncrasy, if you like. I like to be focused on what I'm going to do. When I'm on my way to the work, when I'm on my way, like I said, I just want to be in there. And so there was a series of neighbors that lived around there. They were probably the youngest one, maybe 5 to 10 years older than me, and then the other two were older still. But I had made that choice not to interact with anybody. I didn't speak. People could think of me as rude, could think of me as whatever, but I have a general feeling of I'm going to let you show me who you are. It's not necessarily me who's going to step out of my way to find out who you are. I'm going to be completely neutral. I'm not going to be over nice or mean. I'm going to just be there. Totally neutral. And I want to see what you do, how you react to me. And this one snowy day, I discovered the first of the dominoes in that area. Now, I knew that I learned in Philadelphia, people like to dig out their spots and they try to hold their spots by putting cones or chairs in the way, whatever, right? Now, in front of my mother-in-law's house that we live in, I had just gotten a spot and I dug it out. And I'm like, all right, I'm free. I can now move and put my spot in there. Now, in front of the house, directly in front of my mother-in-law's house where we were living, there was enough space for two vehicles. Now, at the time, my wife still had the Sportage, and I still had my little green 92 Honda Accord. So I need a whole lot of space for my car. Dig it out, no big deal. And there was still leftover space behind my house, in front of my house. So I dug a spot knowing that my wife was going to be home in a matter of minutes. And I'm like, okay, cool, this is great. This is exactly what we want. It's great. Got a space for her. Literally, as I finished my last shovel, the wife of the neighbor who was directly next door pulls right into the spot that I just dug out. Mind you, like I said, I had never interacted with anybody on the block before, not once. not spoken one word to anyone. And the first words that this lady says to me is, "Thank you for digging out that space." And I looked at her and went, "I definitely didn't dig that space out for you. My wife is on her way home." I was like, "Oh, well, it's mine now." And I said, "Okay, now I see how you are. I know what I'm dealing with now. But what you have now just done is you've now put the gamma rays into Bruce Banner or Thunderbolt Ross. Ross. I like the red one better." And I let that go. My wife comes home, I tell her, "Yeah, I took out a spot," and she took it. And she's like, "Ah," and she was not happy about it. And of course, I was looking at this lady and I told her, "This is the beginning. We're going to see where this goes." And of course, her husband comes out a couple days later and he says, "Don't talk to my wife any old kind of way." And I just told him what she did. And he said, "I don't care what she did." Copy. I get it. Okay, that's good. This is when I cue drowning pool. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. And this is in 2011. It was near that same time as that. No, it was the next year. Yeah, this was definitely the next year because we'd moved into the apartment moved out of the apartment and into my mother-in-law's house. So yeah, this is like 2011, 2012. The other incident must have been a little bit. Nah, it must have been later 2011. Because, and now it begins. The neighbors started putting out cones and chairs after they dug out that stuff. I talked to the police that were in the building that my wife worked at, and I asked them, "Is it legal?" Because I didn't know, because I'm from New Jersey, I had no idea about this whole chair or cone culture. And I asked them, "Is it legal to put up a cone or a chair in a space on the street?" And they said, "No, it's not legal. People can put it there and they hope that they honor it." And I'm like, copy. It was on. Remember, I had spent a little bit of time digging out that space, and the neighbor's wife decided to drive right into it. And I said, "All right, from this day forth, you will never have a space that you dug out. You will never have that." And they put their cones out and they put their chairs out, and what did I do? As soon as I seen it, I got rid of it. I moved all the chairs. Every single time they put a cone out. We're talking from 2011 until we left in 2019. But of course, because I did so much damage with the cones and the chairs, throwing them out of the way, essentially making everybody know that, yeah, I am now the boss. What I say goes. You're going to do what you're going to try to do, but I am the dominant force. I would tell people, it's like, I am the alpha. The others are not even betas. They're omegas. They're that far down from where I was. And got to the point where they started learning that they're not going to just push over on me. I was a perfect example of these people mistaking my silence and my kindness for weakness. And they learned real quick that it's not that way. They learned that I was clearly not going to be pushed over, that I was going to be the dominant force on that block. And for years, that's exactly what I was. From the time of that incident with the shoveling in that snow, there was no cones that were not taken by me if I saw it. There was no chair that was not removed in my way. There was no person who would be able to do something that was out of character that I would not address. And it got to the point where over a 4 or 5 year period of time, 6 year period of time, just before I became a corrections officer, that they started to understand that, yeah, that's not going to work. And then when I was in the training process of becoming a corrections officer, and I was going to the gym a lot more, and I had lost a ton of weight, and I had gotten even stronger and faster, now these people had even less to say. And when they started seeing me coming out in my corrections officer uniform, then they really got scared. And there was no issues whatsoever. There was still conversations from time to time with the people, the three, as I like to call them, the three Omegas, who really kept trying to push my buttons. But once they saw me in uniform, all of that ended. And from 2017 until the day we moved, there was not one word from any of them. Not one. They just sort of realized we need to stay in our lane. He's not going to get pushed over. And there were plenty of people that those three in particular did push around before I got there. And people started realizing, yeah, I am not going to go for that. Not at all. And that's the way it was. And that all happened, again, because one lady mistook my silence for weakness. All I gotta say about that is she wasn't smart enough to ever realize the old term, it's always the quiet ones. It's the one person you don't want to mess with, is the quiet one. Always that way. And I got to prove that point. That was a little heavy. Brought me back to a place that I don't necessarily like to go to. But the difference is, if I have to go there, I will. Even as beat up as I am now, I've said it 1,000 times. Like 5 years ago, 2021, I was probably peak in condition and strength. I would go with any inmate, wouldn't be a problem if I had to. But now, bicep, back, hip, I probably got one left in me. And I'm saving it in case I need it. And hopefully I don't. But if I do, I got that one. Yep, I got that one if I need it. Alright. The next snow story that I would have to have would be, it's a lot lighter one. We're going to go back, and I might have even told this story before, but considering the circumstance, I think I want to tell it again because it was a lot of fun. Um, let's see. Some issue. Just that's one I just did. This one is back to high school, and we're not talking about that '96 storm that I mentioned in the beginning. Oh, I didn't mention the '96 storm. Ha! How about that? I'm actually, like I said, I had to. Well, you didn't hear me because in one of the earlier takes that I did, I told an entire story about '96 and the snowstorm that was involved there. So now I'm actually messed up in my head because I told that story, but it didn't get recorded. I need to stop. I just told you about my parking issue, and the one before that, that was actually recorded, I was talking about the apartment and how the nightmare of having to push the 2009 Sportage up the hill. Man, so am I going to go tell the '96 story or am I going to tell the other one, the softer one? Hmm. I'll tell the softer one because it's a lot more fun. I'll tell the '96 story again at a different time. Maybe I'll save that one for 47. Ah. But here it comes. It's 1994. No, 1995. My senior year. 95, 96. Graduated in 96, so this is 95. And it snowed pretty heavily, and it was in December. Now, in my senior year of high school, I tried to play football. I hurt my knee for the last time, and so I couldn't wrestle. I knew that it was going to be a bad idea if I even attempted to wrestle because I did my therapy on my own with the trainer, and my goal was to make sure to do spring track. But because I wanted to be really ready for spring track and I wanted to do another sport, I thought it only made sense if I did winter track for the first time in 4 years of high school. And I believe it was my sophomore year. Yep, Mr. Mims, who was only a teacher at Southern Regional, where I went for 1 year, had actually asked me if I was going to do winter track, and the circumstances were exactly the same. I was just coming off a knee surgery, and I couldn't physically wrestle, but I was a part of the team. I trained with them. I was doing my therapy. I sat in the room. I studied. I watched as much as I could. I gained a lot of knowledge and mental reps. And occasionally, if somebody needed a partner, I would go ahead and I would do it in as safe a way as possible because I wasn't going to have surgery until December of that year. So, of my sophomore year. So I could let them throw me around a little bit, but I couldn't physically compete because my knee wasn't going to let me compete physically, especially before surgery. But I was offered to do winter track, and that would have been a disaster because as much as I wanted to wrestle and couldn't, I know that I would have taped my knee up and hooked myself up as best I could to throw that shot put because I was one of the top guys for my school. And when junior year came, I became one of the better guys in the county. So it would have been one of those situations where I'd have done everything I could in order to get into those winter track meets, and I wanted to wrestle in my junior year, which I didn't do, which I didn't really do anything in my junior year, I should have done one of those two, wrestle or done winter track, and quite literally, my knees were fine in my junior year. I didn't have any residuals from the surgery. Everything was good, and I probably could have had a pretty decent wrestling season. I was going to go heavyweight, and I wrestled a little while, and I went to several couple practices, 3 or 4, I think it was, and then I just it just didn't feel like I wanted to do anything. I wanted to just sort of lift weights and get ready for spring track, which is what I ended up doing. Could have at least on winter track got myself a little bit more warmed up, but I didn't think of it. But here's my senior year of high school, and coming off of the knee surgery, which of course I had in this knee surgery my senior year, I had in October as opposed to December. So I had about a month to get myself together, and what I had was a torn meniscus. So I was able to walk on it in 2 weeks, and then I did physical therapy for about a month, and then here comes the season, and I'm like ready for it. I could walk around. It wasn't so bad that I couldn't throw a shot put inside. And I said, I know if I tried to wrestle, especially at that point, I'd be wrestling heavyweights, and God knows, trying to throw around a guy who was at the heavyweight in high school at Southern, at least in New Jersey at the time, the weight limit was 275. I was going 250. The last thing I need to do is try to throw around a 275-pound mug with my 250, and then I would definitely have tweaked my knee again, and it would have just been a problem in my senior year. But all I could say is I had 7th grade, I had 8th grade, I had 9th grade, and I had 10th grade, but when I could have been a little bit more interesting in those, didn't really happen. But winter track was a nice warm up, and I knew that, hey, it's my senior year, got to give it the last real good push. And so I did. I went and did winter track. Had some success. Got a couple of medals here and there in winter track. I got a silver, one of my favorite silvers of all time. I don't know where I put it. It was kind of cool little trophy sort of thing that we had for that. It was kind of neat. And the person that I beat for it, well, I'm going to talk about him on a later date. But the coolest part about this, and where does winter track and this snow story come in? Comes right here. Went to go practice one day, and usually in winter track, in my senior year, I was, as I think about it now, the term that I can use for what I did in winter track in my senior year versus what I did for every other sport that I ever did, quite literally every sport that I ever did, from 7th grade until that point in my senior year, was I would be on the team, I'm going to practice every single day without fail, no questions asked. I'm there. Boom, 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 boom. What did I do in my senior year in winter track? I took Thursdays off. I took Thursdays off. Now, the way winter track works versus the way spring track worked back then, I don't know how it works now. I don't even pretend to know how it works now. I am literally 30 years away from that program. But the way it used to work in spring track was you'd practice a day, maybe 2, and you'd have a meet, 2 meets in a week. So you might have 3 practices and 2 meets once the regular season starts. In winter track, the way it worked at that time was you would have 1 meet a week, and they wouldn't be like in spring track. They'd be dual meets, meaning that there'd just be 2 teams. And then the tournaments would come at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year, which is weird. At the beginning, you'd have tournaments where you'd have team meets, where in shot put, for example, you'd have two people or three people, and they'd all throw, and they'd combine their distances, real, and then that's what would be the score. That's what you get. You place based on those combined distances. In the end of the year, there were individual tournaments, and of course, there was just the three. There was the county, the shore conference, and the state sectional, and then the state finals. It's four. In winter track, it didn't work that way. Most of the tournaments, there's a lot of them that were those they were all tournaments. There were no individual team meets. And in those tournaments, there would be teams where you'd have, like I said, two people would throw, and you would combine their distances. And there'd be relays, and there'd be a lot of stuff like that in winter track on the inside, but that's how shot put really worked. Very rarely, a couple times a year, you'd start getting individual meets. And I just did not have I didn't get to do a whole lot. It really was a couple of dual meets for me, really, because I went to maybe three of the tournaments that I had a partner, and then I had individual tournaments. I did maybe four, maybe five. I didn't do that many. And it was a good warm up, which is weird because the whole season to me was a warm up in winter track. It was literally a warm up for me to get ready for spring, which of course was where I was going to do my county, my placing in the county. And I was going to dominate in my mind. I didn't do bad. I could have done better had I stayed away from a little bit of heavy leg lifting. And if I had the one throw that I made at the end of the year with me and my cousin and my coach watching me, could have won the short conference. Could have broken the school record. But just like Edge's song, I'll never long for what might have been. But now, we're finally going to get to the snow part. Winter track, I told you I took Thursdays off. And why did I take Thursdays off? Because I was a captain, because I was still only a month after surgery, and it just wasn't really a fully coached environment. Like, essentially, we're kind of on our own, kind of got to do what we wanted to do. There wasn't really a throwing coach in winter track, and so I was able to just sort of rely on what I already knew from the last 6 years or 5 years. It was 5 years, and then just sort of work on that stuff. So I took Thursdays off. Hey, Phoenix. But on this day, it was a Tuesday, and it had snowed pretty heavily. I remember that it was a Tuesday. And me and Adam and Greg, come on, pal. Yep, over there. We're looking for something different to do. We wanted to try a different workout. And because we'd done lots of weights and we threw plenty of shot puts, and it had snowed, and so we said, you know what? Let's go up to the track because it's snowing. Nobody up there. Do what we really wanted to do at that time. So we did. We go up to the track, and no, I can't have you up here. Not right now, Don. Not right now. So we go up to the track, and it's covered in snow. And I believe it was Adam who came up with the idea. Let's make a giant snowman. And Greg was like, you know, it's not a bad idea. And I'm looking at him like, are you looking a little crazy, and I said, you know what, that'd be fun. Let's do this. We have a whole track practice. There's nothing else around here. Let's just do this. So we're outside, and it is cold. And like I said, a long time ago, I was a friend of the cold. I liked it cold. I enjoyed it. And so I was okay with just hanging out in the snow for an hour. So what did we do? We took a little snowball, and we made it, we created it, and it got really big. And we started rolling it around, rolling it around, rolling it around until it got even bigger. Now, there was a point where the snowball was probably 300 pounds. And we're like, okay, we're going to keep moving it around. And I kid you not, the snowball probably got, I can't even imagine how heavy it was. Because all three of us had to push this snowball at a point. And to say that the snowball was probably about, it was nearly 6 feet high. And we kept pushing it and rolling it. And again, thinking about this, hindsight being 2020, how kind of dangerous that was. Because the football field is where we went to make the snowball. Now, granted, there's only one entrance where you could move and go down to get up, rather to go up into the stadium. But the problem is that entrance was, well, not problem, it's good. There's a gate there and a fence, so you couldn't have to worry about the snowball rolling out. But the problem was, if we had continued to move that thing with the momentum that it had, it could have very easily, go on now, go, crushed one of us, because it's safe to say that this giant snowball probably was at least 6 feet tall, and it weighed, I don't even know how much it weighed. It must have weighed, backing around again, Tom. It must have weighed about a ton, and that's not even a figurative number. That's like a literal number. It probably weighed about 2,000 pounds, and that's not a joke. It weighed at least that much, because it at one point required all three of us to push it, and this thing was so heavy, and this hour of building this monstrous snowman, what we were going to call a snowman, we realized that this isn't going to work, because the first one was so big and it had taken us so long. Now, just think about it. We were working on this snowball for about an hour. An hour. A whole hour we were building this big snowball, about 6 feet high, and it must have, like I said, probably weighed about literally 2,000 pounds or more. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was more, because this thing was so heavy. It was ridiculous. And I've said it before, and I will say it again with my hand on a entire dump truck full of Bibles, and swear that that was the hardest workout that I ever had in my entire life, making this giant snowball with these other two guys. And I've never, and that was, part of it was probably because, like I said, I was post knee surgery about a month. Maybe 2 months at this point. But still, I've been doing a little bit of physical therapy, and I had probably had half of my therapy in that I was supposed to have, and then I'm rolling around at the top of the stadium with this gigantic snowball. The only thing that was my saving grace was that it was so cold, and there was so much snow that it was kind of like putting an ice pack on the entire time. So that helped. But that snowball was the heaviest, that was the hardest workout I ever did in my entire life. It really, really was. And at that point, I believe I'm going to ring the bell and I'm going to call that the main event. Heavy, super heavy snowball was, in fact, the hardest workout I've ever done in my life. Yes, Phoenix, I know. Let me finish up, huh? It's 10 minutes to midnight, Phoenix. I gotta finish this up, and then I gotta download this episode. So, that's what I'm gonna do. And, let's see. Those other two are fun, and I can't wait to talk about them in episode 46. And again, I'm letting you see me write my notes for the next episode, because I'm going to promise you that these things that I'm just talking about now are definitely going to be stories that I want to tell. So essentially, I'm making this whole thing. Nope. Say hi to everybody, things. Say hi. But now, I gotta finish this up. Okay, pal? Okay. Well, let's see. We're gonna write these notes in before we finish this up. Okay. That's story number 46, February 28th. Already got it down. I've got the stories that I'm already going to tell you for it. But now, it's time for the Spear of the Week. Considering that, again, the snow is coming, I'm going to go back to that. No, come on. No. Too much. Too much. Too much. The story that I told about the parking space, those fine gentlemen who I really can't stand, all of them are the spear of this week. Because, as I think about it, had it not been for that one snowy day with that one guy's wife, I would have never needed to be aggravated enough where I had to set those guys straight over a period of years. And so, it's safe to say that she would be the spear of the week, because it would only be fair to make the snowy person that decided to drive in that space, who honestly, I never even knew what her name was, which is really even funny. She was my neighbor. Didn't care. Don't care, actually. But I never did know her name. But you're the spear of the week, no doubt. Now we're going to go into my NFL picks, which last week, well, the wild card week, I did better than I thought. I mean, I was 500, which is decent. But of course, that meant I was off by a few on a bunch of them. Now it turns out that the existing games that I know were going to happen, I was much better. I was actually 3 of 4. Got 3 of them right. 3 wins, 1 loss. And the thing that really aggravates me, which almost should have been the spirit of the week, the one that I lost, that's the one that hurts the most. Which means you obviously know who that was. I said the Buffalo Bills were going to lose to the Broncos 30-24. Bills did lose to the Broncos in overtime. Great game. 33-30. I was right. New England Patriots versus the Texans. I thought that was going to end up being 28-20. Now, it was a little bit more of a gap than I said, but I was dead on with the Patriots. They won the game, and they scored 28 points. Texans did lose, but they lost by 4 more points than I said. They only had 16, 28-16. The Rams and the Bears. Man, I really need my head examined because I was wrong. That is not a win. I was good with the AFC and I'm bad with the NFC. This is a loss. Oh, it's a loss. I said Bears 38, Rams 35. I was right by the margin. If you took the points, that'd have been okay. But I definitely didn't do the right score. It was the Rams who won 20-17. I was wrong on that one. And I'm only 500 in these playoffs. And then, of course, the worst one of all was Seattle and San Francisco. I said 49ers 20, Seahawks 17. And the 49ers, who were just a shell of themselves, blown out 41-6. Just the worst literal game of the entire playoffs. And you could tell that they were so beat up that they did not belong in that round. Just a shame. Really an absolute shame that they lost by so much, but it was expected because the biggest loss was George Kittle, and I don't know if we're going to see him until the end, if we see him at the end of next season. I just hope he gets better. But make a long story short, I was 2-2, which makes my total playoff record 5-5. Whew. Not great. As far as the championship games, Seattle and the Rams, the Patriots and the Broncos, the actual existing ones, I say that I hate both the Seahawks and the Rams, and I hope a vortex opens up and they get sucked down into the 10th level. Phoenix. The Broncos and the Patriots, I can honestly tell you that I have no skin in that game, less skin in the other one, but I just, for the life of me, I feel like the Broncos are going to win. And I feel bad about that because Bo Nix hurt himself in that overtime win, and it's a shame. I think that the Broncos are going to get to the Super Bowl and probably win it. And the guy who literally helped them get to that point isn't going to be a part of that big victory on the field, and I think that's just a shame. I think it's going to be 20-14 Broncos, and Seahawks are going to lose to the Rams because they may have a great defense, but as much as I hate it, Matthew Stafford is just a more seasoned quarterback, and he's been there. He's the guy who has the most experience as far as quarterback goes in the entire rest of the playoffs right now. And makes matters worse, he is the only person of this group to make it this far before. And makes it worse still, he's the only quarterback in this group to win the Super Bowl. So I think the Rams are going to win 28-24. I'm looking at this as a Broncos Rams Super Bowl, and if it is Broncos Rams, I think that it's going to be I don't know. I have to think about it. I'm not sure who's going to win that. That's what I like about these playoffs. I'm not sure who's going to win really any of these games. And that's why, like I said, this was such a good playoffs that I was having a tough time in the first round picking, and then a tough time in this round picking. And it's clear and evident by the fact that I am 5-5. I got half the games right, half the games wrong. It's impossible to tell who was going to win. And on that note, my picks for the NFC and AFC Championship games are going to be the Rams 28-24 over Seattle, and the Broncos 20-14 over the Patriots. That's just the way I see it. Now it's time to put the show to bed, just like it's about for me to go to bed. But of course, before I go to bed, I'm actually going to download the episode because as you are listening and as I am recording, this show is now at 12:01 a.m. on January 24th. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to download this episode immediately. So I definitely am right on money. You can't get any closer than that. I need you all to, without doubt, I need you to join us on the Facebook group. Join us on the LIP Facebook group. There's always room for one more member. And hey, I'm trying to get to 100. We need 100 at least. That'd be nice. It's kind of the goal for the month. And it'll be the goal for every month until we get to 100. That's what we're looking for. 100. And then after that, it's going to be 101. You can check me out on Instagram at PhilipHenderson5102. Of course, can't get much more important to this show than to like and subscribe to this episode on at Phil the Lip here on YouTube. And now, the final part of this episode. The words of wisdom. These are good words, and I think that they're just something that people need to hear sometimes. The path to your victory is as difficult as you would like to make it. The path to your victory is as difficult as you would like to make it. You know what you want to achieve. You see your victory right there in front of you. But if you decide to do things the hard way, well, you're going to get things the hard way. If you work hard, that's different than doing things the hard way. Hard work doesn't necessarily mean the hard way. You may have to do things that are easy, but you have to commit to doing those things in order to get to your victory. You could do hard stuff and never get to your victory because that's not what's required in order to do it. You have to figure it out. It's only as difficult as you would like it to be, as you would like to make it. On that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lib. Time for bed.